Hey guys, it's Matt, and I am just recording a quick video for this week, and want to give you a heads up about a couple of things that we're going to be doing that are important this week, and then also do a very quick overview of the PowerPoint, touching on some of the main points. So with that said, let's talk about first your rough draft that is due, and we'll go to the project guidelines. If you see here, the first rough draft is due on October 2nd. That's this Sunday at 11:59. That's due via Canvas, so please go on there and upload your file to Canvas. And then if you look down the requirements, it tells you exactly what the requirements are for this. It needs to be about 250 words long, and use all these other requirements. And I would like you to submit a reference page if you have any references, which you probably should have them by now. So submit a reference page with that. The rough draft is intended to help me know that you all are working on this, that also intended to allow me to give you feedback on your work, help you know if you're going in the right direction, give you some pointers, just in general, help you by allowing me to see your work and give you some good feedback before you just continue on without feedback. So it's a good way for me to be able to communicate with you on how you're doing on your project, and again, to give you some ideas. So please make sure that you do that by this Sunday. If you have any issues with uploading, please email me, or if it's during the week, you can call me. So either today or tomorrow, I'll be in the office. So that is my number down there. With that said, let's talk a little bit about the chapters or the chapter. I say chapters because this really deals with a little bit of chapter 5, the very tail end of chapter 5, and goes into chapter 6. And so I want to talk a little bit about the war, the Revolutionary War itself, and how it started. We can't talk about it without discussing the First Continental Congress, which was set up with an intention to petition the king for a redress of their grievances, and to talk to the British, specifically the king, and to discuss the ways in which they believed that what the British could do in the colonies to help bring the colonies back into a system that would allow them to accept the authority of the British. So basically, some sort of remedy to their problems. So that First Continental Congress, all the colonies were there except for Georgia, so 12 of the 13 colonies. They agree unanimously on these non-importation agreements, and what they said with these is that they would not import goods such as molasses and other things that were being taxed from England, because they didn't want to pay those taxes. And so they also are going to create the association out of this, and that will help to enforce those kind of trade sanctions, those non-importation agreements. And one of the last things they do is they affirm the principle of no legislation without representation. So that should actually say without representation. So you can change that on your end. I just noticed that. But basically what that's saying is they don't want virtual representation. They don't accept the idea that they're being represented somehow because they're all Englishmen. They want to send their own representatives to Parliament. This First Continental Congress took on more of an executive role, more of a role that like the monarch, the king, would have than it did a role like Parliament would have. They weren't really passing laws in the Continental Congress. They weren't taxing. They were really providing some common defense and asking for certain things. They were dealing with other nations, and also with the native tribes as well. The Continental Congress had powers to deal with that, but they were not taxing and they were not creating laws. That was still left up to the individual Congresses in the different colonies. Excuse me. So when we talk about towards war, Massachusetts is really the epicenter of the beginning of the war. And General Gage in 1775 sends a group of redcoats to destroy the stockpile of weapons that John Hancock and Samuel Adams have, and to arrest them. And this is where we get Paul Revere's famous ride. He rides to the countryside in the middle of the night, and he's actually captured at one point, and someone else takes up his job and ends up going through onto Concord. And the first pitched battle that happens, the pitched means where they come together and they actually form these lines, is at Lexington. And at Lexington, the British redcoats rout the approximately 70 to 90 militiamen that are there, these Minutemen that have assembled, and they retreat. They follow them back to Concord, and at Concord, the militia is well ready for the redcoats. They push them back all the way to Boston, and they begin a siege of Boston, and this really sparks off the war. This is sort of a formal start to that war. But at this point, I want you to know that the idea was not about independence yet. And for most of them, for the First and Second Continental Congress that we have, and you see here, you can see they went by sea instead of going down here by land through this neck right here. And so they go across there into Lexington, win there, and then they push into Concord there, and then the British are routed back to Boston, and the colonist militias take up offensive points, siege points on Breed and Bunker Hill, along with some other points. So what I was saying though was that some of this. The first initial portions of the war, they are not wanting independence yet. They are simply wanting England to change their tone, to give them representation, to come in and change the way they're doing. And what they're saying is, if this happens, if England will do this, then we are willing to accept British rule again. We're willing to accept the rule of Parliament. We're willing to accept the rule of the Crown, but only if some of these things are done. And so the move is not towards independence, but towards a redress of grievances. And that's very important to understand, that this was not really a true revolutionary war until they decide to declare independence through that Declaration of Independence. So what we see back to Boston is, like it says here, they push them back to Boston, and at Breed's Hill and Bunker Hill, Gage basically General Gage decides that he needs to end this, and he's going to take a very hard line against these guys. And it's interesting because it becomes a devastating victory for the British. And what I mean by this is that one of the British officers was quoted as saying, we can hardly stand any more victories like this. And what he meant was they're very costly. Gage decided to send multiple regiments straight up the hill rather than try to surround it and take it, piece by piece. He just did frontal assaults on the hill, and they lost over 90 officers, which is an immense amount of officers to lose in one action. And they really created a situation in which it was a very costly victory for them. They eventually do move the militia off of Breed's Hill and Bunker Hill, and the militia suffers some 300 losses, most of that during their retreat. There is also some battling up in the interior of New York at Fort Ticonderoga. There, the militia takes the colonial militia, these patriots, if you will. They capture the cannons and powder stores at Fort Ticonderoga, but they do eventually lose the fort. But it's an initial success, and the thing that's important about it, was that it allowed them to continue to siege Boston because of those cannons and powder stores that they got from Fort Ticonderoga. When the Second Continental Congress is called, they decide to appoint Washington, General George Washington, in command of the Continental Army. This happens in June of 1775. And again, they're taking more of a executive role. Again, they're not taxing, they're not legislating, but they are providing for common defense. And so they put together this army, and their objective is still to restore the government by consent. So that they want to consent to the government. They don't want the government to just be forced on them. And so they send this olive branch petition, and Thomas Jefferson is actually going to write this Declaration of the Causes and Necessities of Taking Up Arms. And this is sort of him saying, look, the only reason we're taking these up is because we have to. And that's very important, again, to note that it is not until later that they are going to declare their independence. They are still looking for restoration. They are still looking for the government to become something that they can agree with, okay? The crown is going to, so the monarch, George III, he's going to declare the colonies a rebellion in August of 1775, okay? So stop there for 1 second. I'll be right back. All right, sorry about that. I had a student come in and had to help them. So where was I? Let's go back to this here and talk about, we're going to continue the discussion of the Second Continental Congress. So like I said, they come up with these, Jefferson with his Declaration of the Causes and Necessities of Taking Up Arms. Again, the Crown declares them a rebellion. It is important to note that while most of the Continental Congress was in favor of some sort of restoration of the British government under a revised and remediated agreement where they come together and deal with their issues that they have. There were some radicals in the group who believed independence was what was needed. It was the only way out. But again, that's not the norm. And so those radicals are still kind of the smaller voice in the discussions at this point. And so the Second Continental Congress will also begin acting more like a government by that fall. And so they still don't tax or regulate beyond encouraging the non-importation. They also do agree on non-exportation, meaning they won't export to the British in some areas, and they take command of the Continental Army. They print paper money, open diplomatic relations with Indian nations, take over the postal service, and decided which government was legitimate in the individual colonies. Because remember, in the individual colonies, we have the same sort of thing going on, where we have the colonial assemblies and the colonial congresses, and these assemblies are the British governing bodies that are approved by the Crown, and then these congresses are these group of men who are asking for the Crown to stop some of these laws, like the Intolerable Acts or the Coercive Acts. They called them the Intolerable Acts. So with that said, we will see them move into open war. And one of the things I want to talk about is that Declaration of Independence. And that evolution that we see on this war and legitimacy is that because of multiple things, but especially the Crown declaring them in rebellion, it really pushes the colonists towards this sense of, look, we are only going to solve this issue through a revolution. And so the radicals' calls for revolution, for independence, become louder and louder. Dunmore's proclamation really pushes us towards this. What they do in that is Dunmore was the governor of Virginia, John Murray, the Earl of Dunmore. He offers freedom to any slaves of these rebel planters who had joined the British Army. About 800 do. They are put down pretty quickly, and this really throws Virginia and the whole South into that camp of we need independence. Massachusetts had been there. The mid-Atlantic colonies were sort of, so what I mean by that is I mean New York and Maryland and Pennsylvania. They were kind of waffling on whether or not to go along with this. New Jersey would be included in that mid-Atlantic. But once this sort of thing happens, they really look at it and they start saying, look, we have got to do something more than just ask for a redress of grievances. It's beyond that now. The only way we're going to get what we want is through revolution and through independence. And so they draft this Declaration of Independence in 1776. And I want to read you guys a little bit of some of the quote from Thomas Paine's Common Sense, and some of what Thomas Paine says. It's not really necessarily from Common Sense, but Thomas Paine was the author of this very popular book, Common Sense, this pamphlet. And he basically says, as your book says, it's on page 157, it says to him, talking about Thomas Paine, George III was the Pharaoh of England and the royal brute of Great Britain. Okay, so Paine did not like George III, the King of England at the time. He attacked the monarchy and aristocracy as degenerate institutions and urged Americans to unite under a simple republican government of their own. And what he said was, reconciliation and ruin are nearly related. There is something very absurd in supposing a continent to be perpetually governed by an island. What Thomas Paine is saying is that if they're just seeking reconciliation, it will cause them to crumble. They will not get what they want. Britain will win out. And he says, it's absurd to think that this giant continent that should be run by itself, they should have self-government. It's absurd to think that they should be perpetually ruled by an island, speaking of Britain, okay? And so this is very important. And so I had you guys go through the Declaration of Independence last week, and you guys had a really good discussion. I appreciate that discussion. I made some personal comments when I graded, so if you guys want to look at some of those, I didn't make any public comments, but I made some personal comments to each of you about some of those things. But I thought that you guys all made some very interesting arguments in there. But one thing I do want to talk about is I had asked, why do you think they addressed the King of England rather than Parliament in that Declaration of Independence? And a lot of you gave a lot of different answers. But one thing to think about is, and your book talks about this a little bit, and it's very important to understand this, is that had they addressed Parliament, they would have been legitimizing Parliament. And what they were saying was Parliament had no right to govern them without representation, okay? They did not say that the king did not have the right to govern them. They said that he needed to govern them, but that they needed representation in Parliament so that they could have some say over their laws. And by addressing the king and saying that all of these things that he was doing, although many of them were done by Parliament, were causing them to declare independence and break these bonds and these institutions that have been around for quite some time. They said that, look, we're breaking these not, with a light heart. It's tough to do, but we're doing it because it's persistent. It's tyranny. When they call him a tyrant, this is a really negative thing at the time. And so we have to understand that they address the king because they don't want to give legitimacy to Parliament. And they want to put it squarely on the king, and they want to say, look, we don't believe Parliament is our representative in any way, shape, or form, and therefore we're not going to address them. So I wanted to bring that up. The last thing I want to talk about, the second to last thing. So I want you guys to go through reading this, and following along the war itself. And one thing I want you to do while you're doing that is go on to your course, and I'll scroll down here to week 6, and you can go into the Revolutionary War interactive maps. This is what it looked like for you. So go into week 6, and I have uploaded these Revolutionary War animated maps. I like them. I think it's a great website. It's from historyanimated.com. And I want you to, as you read about these, go through each one of these. There's quite a few of them, and I know this may take a while, but I think it will give you a really good idea of what's going on in the area. And there's things to read, and there's things to click on. And so I'll just show you one here. You'll see it has this sound that's with it, and you can pause it and play it and go on, and you can click next, and something went wrong there. So we'll go ahead and play, and you'll see they have, the nice thing about this, they have all these maps on here, and I want you to go through each of these and kind of play them as you can. And let me turn that off because it's kind of hard to be able to talk and listen to that at the same time. But I want you to go through them. One, these maps are interesting because they give you a theater level, and the theater level is a macro level or a large scale level. So they're going to give you a theater look at the area, so you're going to be able to get a kind of a spatial awareness of where this is on a map. And then they also give you a battlefield level treatment of it. So you're going to see large scale troop movements, going from Boston up to all the way up to Quebec, right? But then you can also see the micro level, the battlefield map. That's going to show you some of those really intricate things that happen during the specific battles. And so I think if you go through these while you're reading and look through all these campaigns, it's going to give you a really good idea of the progression of the war, and help you discover some of the most pivotal moments of the war. So I enjoy those maps. When I do this class, in class, I actually go through them with you, but I'll let you guys do that on your own, and trust that you'll do that. I think it will really help you understand this a little bit better. And so the last thing I want to talk about, and I've kind of jumped around here quite a bit, is we're gonna skip the war because I'm going to let you kind of do that on your own. And I want to go to a discussion of it's not in this PowerPoint, and it's technically on next PowerPoint. I was forgetting that chapter 7, so let me open that. Here, and U.S. History, U.S. History 1, and PowerPoints revised. PowerPoint 7 has bits of chapter 6. This is kind of going forward. Most of your quiz for this week will cover the war itself, so you need to really look into that little bit of chapter 5. That's actually from pages 155 all the way to the end of the chapter, and then go through the war, which really ends on page 180 in your book. So really that's what this area is going to cover. But I want to talk real quick a little bit about the Constitutional Convention itself. And go ahead and resume this share here so that you can see what I'm talking about. So the Constitutional Convention comes about, and I'll discuss this more in detail next week, but because of the Confederation, the Articles of Confederation, which is the government that we have during and directly after the Revolutionary War, it doesn't really hold up. and there starts to become some major cracks in the Articles of Confederation. Okay, and because of that, because of those problems, they call a constitutional convention to order. And there's a lot of things in here, and I'll talk about these more in detail. But I want you to understand that September is actually the month that we celebrate Constitution Day, and it's because on September 19th, September 17th, we celebrated it this year on the 19th, but on September 17th is when the Constitution was signed and went into effect. And the thing about it is that it was a document born out of necessity. The Articles of Confederation were not working. And so when you're reading about it at the end of this chapter and into the next chapter, chapter 7, I really want you guys to be thinking about that. This thing we call the Constitution, and I don't think I have anything else here that I really want to discuss on that PowerPoint itself, but this thing that we call the Constitution is not just a document that they set down and made up and said this would be the best form of government. It was somewhat reactionary. It was somewhat where they said, look, the government that we created, these Articles of Confederation, this confederation that we had, is not working. And we need to do something to get a stronger central government. We need to do something to help alleviate some of the problems, the money problems. A lot of it was economic, some of the insurrection problems that they had, and some of the problems that they had dealing state to state. And so they go through this process of really, hashing out this new government to help alleviate these problems that they're having. So when you're reading about that, keep that in mind, that this is a document that is not just, a bunch of men sitting around thinking up what's the best form of government. It is that they have some problems that are happening, and they're trying to decide, okay, what's the best way to deal with these issues. So with that said, I think you guys have enough to do for this week. Please don't forget to go through those history animated things, read on them as you go through them. Really seek to understand the war, because that's what this quiz 5 is mostly over. Quiz 6 will cover actually the back end of this chapter into all of chapter 7. Just be aware of that. If you guys have any questions or concerns, let me know. I'm available via email. I'm trying to get back to you guys as soon as possible. When you email me, occasionally I forget or I miss an email, but for the most part, I think I've been getting back to most people same day, if not directly early the next day. So I hope you guys have a good rest of the week, and I will see you in a few weeks when we have class, and I will be posting another video next week. Have a good day.